Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started and kind of read some of the instructions for using public input. Thank you everyone for joining us today. I am Casey Judge. I'm with the Department of Planning and Development and in the Zoning Administration Division. So I am joined by Peggy Deline with the Department of Code Compliance, and today we're going to go over just a couple of different topics related to sign regulations. So before I go over our agenda and the different Q&A sessions, we are using public input today, which is how you all are viewing this meeting. So during the meeting, there will be 3 Q&A periods. You can submit your comments or your questions into the chat at any time throughout the meeting. And then we'll get to it during the next Q&A session. So I have Janan Cato and Carmen Bishop on the line from the Department of Planning and Development, Zoning Administration Division as well. And they're going to be helping monitor the comments and chats. And if you have any technical questions, we also do have Sarah Godfrey on the line, and she'll be able to kind of provide some guidance on how to make sure you're getting your comments and your questions over to us. So during the Q&A period, if you do want to speak, please call the phone number on the website, which is 855-925-2801, and then enter meeting code 8383. There'll be some prompts, kind of a phone tree to walk you through, and you can leave an audio message for us, or you can also wait for us to unmute you. If English is not your primary language, click the translate button at the top of the page, and that's going to let you see the closed captions. And then also the chat box will then appear in the language of your choice. To make comments or ask any questions, please use the chat box for any of those comments or questions. And the closed captions are available by default. So if you do want to turn them off, click the CC button at the bottom right of the page. And if you have any technical issues or questions, like I mentioned, please put them in the chat and we will make sure to get to them and to address them. So with that, I'm going to go ahead. Like I mentioned, I do have some slides that we want to walk through today. I'm really focusing on sign regulations, and we are going to start with an overview of the existing regulations that pertain to signs. Then we'll pause for questions and comments, and then we'll move on to Peggy's going to talk us through the zoning ordinance enforcement and signs in the right-of-way process. So she'll give a great perspective on the code compliance side of things. And we'll pause for questions, and then we will move on to an upcoming zoning ordinance amendment on the sign regulations, where we do want to hear from you all on what topics we should be considering as part of that amendment. So we'll go ahead and dive into the zoning ordinance regulations. So if you are not familiar with the ordinance, or even if you are familiar, we did have a new zoning ordinance go into effect on July 1st of last year. And Article 7 of that new ordinance includes the signs. So as part of that new ordinance, a lot of the sign regulations just were brought forward from a 2019 zoning ordinance amendment. That amendment came out of a Supreme Court decision that required us to basically rewrite all of our sign regulations in a content neutral manner. So we can't regulate signs based on the message of that sign. So all of these regulations that we'll be going over today are located in Article 7 of the ordinance. In terms of the permitting requirements, unless specifically exempted by the ordinance, all signs do need to obtain a permit. We do have some exemptions. I would say most notably probably for this group is the minor signs. These are signs that are easily moved. They're typically not permanently attached to a structure of the ground, and they're not illuminated. So this can include your sidewalk or A-frame signs, banners, posters, window signs, yard signs, and other similar movable signs. So all those sign types do not need a permit. We also do have a list of other different types of signs that don't need a permit, and that's included in Article 7. So for today, I'm going to touch on some of the different sign types that may be of interest to you all. First is the minor signs, and this is for properties that are non-residential. For a property that's located on a major thoroughfare, we do allow up to 32 square feet of building mounted and freestanding signs. So if you're interested to find out if you're located on a major thoroughfare or not, we do have a link called the Roadways by Functional Classification list. And that basically says if you're considered to be a major thoroughfare or not. All other lots are limited to 24 square feet of signage, and then a maximum of 2 freestanding signs are allowed, and those can be up to 4 feet in height. I will note for off-premise commercial signs, so like signs that are advertising an event or a religious assembly use that are located off-site, so not on the principal property where the event's taking place or the use is happening on another private property. We do have a limitation that these may only be displayed from 12 p.m. on Fridays to 12 p.m. on Mondays. And the sizes of these signs are limited to the sizes that I just discussed for the minor sign allowances. Window signs are another common sign type that we get questions on. We do allow window signs with up to a maximum of 30% coverage of the window in which the signs are located. And then A-frame signs, the sidewalk signs, another common sign type to draw attraction to a use. We allow one A-frame sign up to 16 square feet in size and up to 4 feet tall. We do have the requirement that it's located within 25 feet of a building or site entrance and that it cannot impede pedestrian or vehicular traffic as well. Electronic display signs are another relatively common sign type that we're seeing throughout the county. We do allow electronic display as part of the freestanding sign allowances. You are permitted one electronic display sign per lot, and it is limited, the size is limited to 50% of the maximum allowable size that a freestanding sign would get. So 50% of that sign area for the electronic display screen itself. We do have limitations on how often it can move or change. So it's no more than once every 8 seconds. Really, that gets away from having like a strobe light effect, flashing, fading. So it does have to be an instantaneous change. The background of these signs cannot be white, off-white, gray, or yellow. And then we do have a photo cell required that would control the brightness. So at sunset, it must automatically dim to a certain level of nits. And that's, to make sure that we're not having any unintended lighting effects. There are a couple different ways that we do allow for special approvals to ask for additional sign additional sign allowances on a property. I would say the most common are the last two, the special exception and the comprehensive sign plan. So the special exception allows for a waiver of certain sign regulations, and it does require a public hearing with the Board of Supervisors. And then the comprehensive sign plan currently is only allowed for planned districts, and it just goes to the Planning Commission. I will note that these two and really all of these special approvals are something that we do want to look at as part of the upcoming zoning ordinance amendment. So we'll talk about that a little bit later as part of the amendment as well. And just to note, we also do have a list of prohibited sign types in the county. I would say most notably, we do get a lot of complaints about moving or windblown signs. So these types of signs are not permitted in the county, and we do list out some additional prohibitions based on location or materials in subsection 7100.5. So if you're interested on seeing the others, they are located there in the zoning ordinance. And then there's a couple other sections and subsections to highlight that are relevant to signs. We do have regulations that are for non-conforming signs, so signs that maybe predate the zoning ordinance regulations are included in 7100.6. We also have a subsection that specifically shows how to measure signs, so how the sign area is calculated. And then I think the 7101 is also applicable for signs in residential districts and signs in commercial and industrial districts. There's a couple other subsections that do relate to different allowances for more of your permanent sign types in those zoning districts. So we do have some really helpful links that are on our website if you're not familiar with them already. The first one is a link to the sign ordinance regulations. So basically just summarizes what I just walked through in the PowerPoint. We also have a page specifically dedicated to sign permits. So if you have questions on how to apply, or if you're refacing a sign, or how to calculate sign area, that's also a really great resource. In addition, that the signs FAQs is really great. So if you're curious or you think you have a question that maybe has already been asked and answered, check out the FAQs page as a great resource. So before we move on to zoning ordinance enforcement, are there any questions that we've received in the chat or anybody in the queue that has questions on the current zoning ordinance regulations as they pertain to signage? Anything, Janan or Carmen? Are we seeing anything in the chat?
Not seeing anything in the chat or in the queue.
Okay. All right. Well, feel free, anybody, if you do have questions on the current regulations, to go ahead and add those to the chat or give us a call. But without further ado, I'm going to let Peggy take us through the zoning ordinance enforcement.
Thank you, Casey. So what happens if someone has a complaint about a sign? You can call the Department of Code Compliance, or DCC. The Department of Code Compliance is a complaint-driven, multi-code enforcement agency that was formed in 2010. We have approximately 35 investigators, supervisors, and admin staff who respond to and investigate complaints. The codes that we enforce in DCC are the zoning ordinance, the Uniform Statewide Building Code, which includes Part 1, the construction part, and the Virginia Maintenance Code, which is Part 2, the Statewide Fire Prevention Code, the Noise Ordinance, and the Grass Ordinance. DCC last year responded to approximately 7,500 complaints in 2020. You can file a complaint by calling our number at 703-324-1300, or you can see us on the website and file a complaint that way as well. So how do we enforce? So DCC, once we get a complaint, a DCC investigator is assigned to the case, and they conduct a site visit, and they try to and they also try to contact the responsible party. They look at the sign, try to identify the type of sign, the dimensions, the location, and height, and to determine if a sign permit is required. And if it is required, does it conform to what was issued? We verify any prohibited signs, the types, sizes, and locations. And if a violation is found, we issue notices of violation with a time frame to comply. But we always try to gain compliance without having to issue the notice of violation. We try to work with the homeowner. A lot of times, especially like the yard signs, the minor signs, once we educate the homeowner, they're willing to come into compliance by removing one sign, two signs, or whatever it takes. After we issue the notice of violation and the time period has elapsed and the property owner has not done anything, then we can initiate litigation to achieve compliance. One of the other ways we enforce signs in the county, which is not in the zoning ordinance, and it is not complaint driven, but is enforced through DCC, is signs in the right of way. It's called, this illegal sign removal program was started in 2013, and it was authorized by Commissioner of Highways to enforce Virginia Code 32.2-12224. This program is enforced by DCC, and it includes 99 major roadways. Most of these roadways are the major roadways, and they are not your neighborhood roadways. So how do we enforce the illegal sign program? The signs are, we have two staff who go out Tuesday through Thursday, and they document the signs that are in the right of way. They photograph them, they document them, they take the GPS measurements, and document where this illegal sign is kept. They issue a warning letter. And then also Tuesday through Thursdays, the Sheriff's Community Labor Force, or CLF, collects these signs weekly. They do send the informational letter, and after one informational letter is issued, and they continue to violate, they can be fined up to $110 per sign.
All right, do we have any questions on the code compliance and enforcement process or the signs in the right-of-way program? Jan and Carmen, any questions, or are we moving on to the third and final section?
Not seeing any comments or any requests to speak.
Okay, all right. Well, hopefully you've all saved them for this last portion, which is an upcoming zoning ordinance amendment, signs part 2. So as I mentioned, in 2019, we did our part 1, which was the content neutrality rewrite. So now the board, as part of their work program, has asked us to take a look at the other regulations and to see what else does need to be revisited in terms of sign regulations. So as staff, we have identified a few kind of topics that we do want to take a look at, but we're very interested in hearing back from you all on any topics that maybe we should also be looking into. So the first is the one that I did allude to previously in my slides. We do want to take a look at the approval processes, specifically that comprehensive sign plan process. We've gotten some requests to look at the ability to expand the comprehensive sign plan process to not just planned districts, but also to other non-residential districts. I think it's very important to have signs as a placemaking component. We've gotten a lot of requests from commercial shopping centers to be able to keep up and have that placemaking element to be able to have some additional signage. As part of that process review, we do also want to take a look at including standards. So this will help staff assess the sign plans against a certain set of standards in the zoning ordinance. We do also want to make sure that we're preserving flexibility for creative sign making as well. And we do want to look at submission requirements and actually including base submission requirements in the zoning ordinance. Another comment that we have received is that for mixed use developments and multifamily buildings, it's a little unclear how signage is calculated. So we do want to clarify that and take a look at making sure it's understandable. And, this is a very common development type throughout the county. So we want to make sure that it is a clear process. And then the third kind of column is other regulations, other revisions we might want to revisit. We have gotten some questions and comments, especially with the pandemic, about mobile pickup signs and what the appropriate amount is to allow for mobile pickup for drive-through orders. We've also gotten some comments about properties that are actively undergoing construction and if the amount of signage that is allowed is the appropriate and correct amount. And I think really some of the others, we just want to hear from you all. We want to hear what's working, what isn't. We are looking at another U.S. Supreme Court coming out of Austin, Texas, Supreme Court case, and it has to do with digital billboard signs. So we may have to make some tweaks depending on what comes out of that Supreme Court case. But really, we do, like I said, we want to hear from you all. If the current regulations are working, is the signage allowances, is that sufficient for your groups and for, your types of developments? Or is there a topic that we need to revisit that maybe we did take a look at in 2019 and need to come back to and look at with fresh eyes? So this is really where I'd like to open it up and see if we do have any questions or comments or feedback on different topics that we should be considering as part of the upcoming sign ordinance amendment. Any comments or questions that we're receiving in the chat or phone calls? And I will go ahead and speak to the timeline very briefly while we're hopefully waiting for some questions or comments. So we are looking, this is part of we're kicking off our outreach. We've done a couple of community meetings in January and we'll continue meetings like this one, as well as going to the land use committees throughout the county and the different magisterial districts throughout the spring of this year. We're then hoping to be able to kind of gather all of the feedback that we've heard and present that to the Board of Supervisors, not at a public hearing, but at a land use policy committee meeting, which is a committee meeting of the board members, where they can provide guidance and direction for us on what topics they'd like to see us amended based on what we're hearing from stakeholders and the community. So after that, we then go on to do some drafting of some proposed regulations and bring that out for feedback for community outreach as well in the summer and fall, before actually going to the public hearings with the Planning Commission on the board to get a vote on the proposed changes. Any questions or comments yet?
None yet. People seem to be pretty quiet.
Well, we'll give just another minute, but while we are waiting to see if there are any thoughts, if you do want to think about this and ponder the potential changes for the upcoming zoning ordinance amendment, I've included my email address on the screen here, so you can feel free to send any questions or comments my way. My phone number is also included on the slide, as well as code compliance. We do have their email address listed and their phone number if there are any specific complaint questions or submitting a complaint, that information is included for you all. Well, if there's nothing coming through, I would say that I will let everybody enjoy the rest of their lunch and thank everyone for joining us. Please, like I said, feel free to reach out if you do have any questions or comments down the line. All right, thank you, everyone. Have a great Tuesday.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.